Righty, evening everybody. So we are on chapter 306, and this is the section of Mimtzoa Cheftzecha. So this is from the book of Yechezkel, where he says that on Shabbat we take a break from involving, engaging in our own activities and our own chafetzim, things that we want to do. So the idea is that Shabbat should be a day devoted to Hashem. So even if it's not actual malacha, if it's devoted to your activities, not Hashem's activities, weekday activities, not Shabbos activities, then that's going to be a problem. And the examples that we saw problematic if it's obvious from your actions what you're doing. So in other words, if you're going for a stroll, you're a farmer, and you go for a stroll through your fields, and you go every Shabbos, but this Shabbos you're looking to see where it's irrigated nicely and where it needs more work and wherever else. That may not be correct for Shabbat, but that's not a violation of Mimtzoa Cheftzecha. Violation of Mimtzoa Cheftzecha would be you take out the key, you go to your storeroom, you open it up, you count, you do it, Okay, so obviously you don't write it down or whatever else, but that kind of thing is a violation of Mimtzoa Cheftzecha, where the action itself shows that you're doing something for the sake of the week.
If I'm in business and I talk to you about business, just as how was your week? What's going? Things are going cuckoo. I fired this one, I did that one.
Yes.
And then is that totally not cool?
That is a good question, and that's going to be covered in the next chapter, which is Daber Davar, which is about speech on Shabbos. So chapter 307 is about speech on Shabbos. Chapter 306 is about doing actions for the sake of the weekday.
Person, and then the next one is about two people.
Even just one person, even if you're just talking, but yeah, basically it normally would be two. But here it's about action, there it's about speech.
Okay.
So that's what we're learning about. The actions on Shabbat, which are for the sake of after Shabbat, are problematic if it is clear that they are for the sake of after Shabbat. So the other example he says is that you're waiting by the city so that you can go to the bathhouse right afterwards. Now again, that's quite clear. You know, you're standing there. Which is leaving an hour and a half after Shabbat comes out. So I want to be in the car 1 minute after Shabbat's out. So what does that mean? That means I'm going to pack my bag on Shabbos. I'm going to get everything ready. I'm going to have the bag by the door. You know, they're going to have the keys on the hook. So, well, this is actually, they asked me about Shavuot. So it's the 3-day Yontif. Okay. So they're not going to be packing their bags before because all their stuff is going to be.
Yeah. What happens if you do everything before Shabbos and I'm on the taxi to the airport?
Well, that shouldn't be a problem. The question is, what's before the pick?
You're waiting the whole time, waiting.
You're sitting you're sitting at home singing Zmirot, learning Torah, whatever. And the thing goes, you get up and go. So that's fine.
Yeah,
but
if you get people who order their Uber for 2 minutes after Shabbos.
Yeah. You're saying they ordered it?
Before Shabbos.
Before Shabbos. Yeah, that's fine.
So that's
good
okay.
thinking, actually. That would be fine.
The
problem is you're standing there, you change your clothes into your traveling clothes all during Shabbos. You change your clothes and you're packing your bags and you're taking the things and you're standing by the door and now it goes. So now you can. That's not the correct way. Okay. So you should really, again, it depends on how much you need to prepare. But if you're going to need 10 minutes, to prepare, so then set your Uber for 10 minutes after Shabbos and do your preparation when Shabbos comes out, not 10 minutes before Shabbos comes out. And it gives the other example of waiting by the tchum, the boundary of the city, in order to go out, which again is generally speaking forbidden. The Ramor says as well, you're not allowed to go around to find transport. So in other words, you're looking for ships and you're looking for caravans, you're looking for all these, like you like to do on Shabbos, it's just this time you are keeping an extra eye out for it, then that is a different halakha. The next one is if you're and bring it because you're not allowed to go out of that area. Now, even though you're not allowed to go beyond that boundary, you are allowed to wait, or you're not even allowed to wait there for Shabbos to come out. You are allowed to wait there for Shabbos to come out if it's for the sake of a kala or for the sake of the deceased. Now, when we talk about the mate over here, the deceased, or we talk about the kala, does this only mean the most extreme case of the mitzvah? What I mean, the most extreme case of the mitzvah, we talk about doing the wedding for an orphaned bride, that she has no one in the world, but you're the only one who would be able to help her. Is that what's included over here? Or is it even just a regular bride that she's getting married? Even a regular bride. And so too, if somebody's deceased, is it, well, you're involved with the funeral, or is it only if it's like a mate's mitzvah who has nobody else to tend to this person? No, even if it's a regular deceased person, look, somebody needs to do it, so you're doing it. I mean, whether you're connected or not connected, you work for the Chevra Kaddish or whatever it is, this is the mitzvah that you're doing. And so what happens is you got the person one village over with the fabric that's needed for the funeral shrouds, and you need to get that Saturday night to start working so you can go and wait by the exit of the city, even though everybody sees and realizes that you're waiting on Shabbat to do something that's not permissible on Shabbat, because the fact that this mitzvah of taking care of the deceased or taking care of the bride is a sufficiently important mitzvah that we're allowed to, that we put up with that, so to speak, disrespect for Shabbat. Now, what if you want to say to somebody, tomorrow, now this really seems to me like it should a little bit belong in the next chapter, but they mention it over here. So I want to say to somebody, Eli and I are discussing a certain purchase of submarine materials, and I say to Eli, you need to go to get the oxygen tanks tomorrow. Please go to this shop, and if you don't find it there, try a different shop. Oh no, we're talking for a mitzvah. We're talking for a mitzvah. We're talking for a mitzvah. No, we're talking for a mitzvah. So it's not. You're right. It's not the oxygen tanks. It's oxygen tanks for a sick person. I know it's the funeral shop. If you don't find it in the shroud shop in Long Street, there should be something in Baton Cunt. So whatever else you're going to go looking around over there. That's a big episode. That's the case with the shrouds that you're allowed to stay in the region of 300-400 rand. The Machaber says you're allowed to do that as long as you don't say something like, "Okay, Ila, go buy the shrouds, but don't pay more than 320 rand." Machaber says you're not allowed to say that. But if you say, "Oh, allowed," thank you very much.
So, can I just ask you what time is the Mishna back then?
7:30.
And that goes into what time?
9:30.
Because we don't have to lock up tonight.
Don't have to lock up tonight. If you wouldn't mind waiting till 9:30 to lock up, that's appreciated.
I'll come back.
So, no, it's all good. Thank you. Yeah. So then what we have is you're talking about going to the shroud shop. So the Machaber says, why can't you say don't go above 420 rand or whatever? He says, because then you're doing business not for the mitzvah, but to save yourself money. If you say, 500 rand. So, okay, the main thing is that you should get the mitzvah item. But if I'm saying 440 rand and not 450 rand, so then we're now doing business. Yeah. So that's the Machaber's distinction. One second. The Ramo himself says, listen, if you're giving prices, then it's no good. If you're giving prices, you're doing business. So therefore you can't do that. That's the way the Ramo holds.
Between 325 and 326. Right?
So there clearly the Machaber says, clearly you're then doing business. Anybody else have something? All right, good. Now, here's an interesting thing, the idea of havla'ah. This is something that comes up a lot when you talk about businesses on Shabbat, whether you're running a business or whatever it is, working and all those kinds of things. The idea is like this. You're not allowed to charge for Shabbat, for services rendered on Shabbat. You are allowed to charge for things that are on Shabbat and not on Shabbat, or things that you are allowed to charge together with things you aren't allowed to charge. If it's a package, you can charge for the package. There's permissible and not permissible things in there. But if it's only Shabbat stuff, that's going to be problematic. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We're in Shin Vav Halacha Daled. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Here he's saying that I'm hiring somebody as a day worker. So I'm hiring him to watch my garden. I guess to be like a scarecrow. So maybe also to fix up if anything breaks in the irrigation or whatever else. I'm hiring him to take care of my garden. So he's taking care of my garden, and I say to him, each day that you work, I'll pay you 100 rand. So comes Shabbos, he doesn't work, and the crows come and eat all the things that are growing over there. So I say to him, you failed in your job, you owe me the money. He says, no, You can't employ me to work on Shabbat, so therefore I wasn't employed. Or even he went there and the crows ate all the stuff. He says to me, you can't employ me to work on Shabbat, so therefore I'm not liable. And the truth is, he's correct. But the same thing, he comes around, he goes there on Shabbat, and he comes to me after. He says, okay, now another 100 rand, please. I say, I can't employ you to work on Shabbat. So it goes both ways. If you're employing somebody by the day, then even if they're not doing any malacha, it's still going to be prohibited for them to be employed for Shabbat. However, if you're doing it for a week at a time, I'm employing you for a whole week, well then Shabbat is absorbed within that. Then you are allowed to have that. The other example that they give is they sometimes talk about preparation. I'm not paying you for the work, I'm paying you for the preparation. Rabbi Smith says that he had a friend who was working in one of the communities in Europe, that he used to come in for Shabbos to give shirim or whatever else. He lived somewhere else, but they'd bring him in for Shabbos to give shirim. So they said, we'll pay you, I'm going to make up figures, we'll pay you 500 rand per shiur. So he said to the chairman, he said, look, you can't pay me for the shiur. You can pay me 500 rand for preparing for each shiur. So he said, I'm not going to pay you for preparing for the shiur. Because what happens if you prepare the shiur and then you don't come? Then I'm still going to have to pay you. So I don't want that. I pay for delivery. You give the shiur, you get your money. You don't give the shiur, you don't get your money. So I think in the end the guy gave up the deal. I was just thinking to myself.
Could you not say preparation and?
Well, I don't think you could say and. You could say on condition. This is what I would think. I'll pay you for the preparation on condition that you give the shiur. Listen, wait, it was Sam then, listen.
What happens if, like, he prepared the shiur on Shabbos?
It's a good question.
Week. Then you said you can't pay them on Shabbat if they're working on Shabbos also.
Yes.
So can you still pay them for the hour, because then you can't pay depending on how much work they do on Shabbos?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. The Mishna Brura brings the case. I'm paying him for the week, and then he doesn't come on Shabbos. It was only Shabbos. Now, why do some say that you can? We understand why you can't. But why do some say that you can? Because for a mitzvah, the rabbis never decreed over Schar Shabbat. Shabbat, and you won't see bracha from it. Okay, so in other words, you really want to get the best kind of money. It's not the money that you get from doing stuff on Shabbat. But look, what can I tell you? People who are earning a living. Okay. Then he says, but one thing that the Mishnah Berurah does add in is that you shouldn't actually do the deal on Shabbos and Yom Tov itself. You shouldn't actually have all the negotiations and the agreements and whatever else. That you shouldn't do on Shabbos. Okay, so to organize it before, that's one thing. Now they say, the Mishnah Berurah brings as well from the Achronim, that they say that the custom is to be lenient in this matter. We do hire people just to like daven for Shabbos and Yom Tov and that kind of thing. And if you are worried about it, so don't set an exact price. Just say, just agree that there will be remuneration, and whatever they give you, you can count it as a gift. He says, if you're worried about it. But it comes out that we don't have to prohibit it. Now, you are allowed to be involved in things for mitzvot, as we've seen before. All these principles apply mostly when it comes to doing your own things. When it comes to mitzvot, we're much more lenient. So the example is doing the accounts for a mitzvah, sitting and working out. Rabbi Ari Levine, for example, had what they call today a rabbi's discretionary fund, where people would give the rabbi money, and then other people would ask the rabbi for money. So he's acting as a conduit. He's there as a holding bank account that people know they can give to him and got a worthy cause. And other people know that he has resources and they can go and ask him. So Rabbi Ari Levine had such an account. But what he used to do was he had a notebook where he wrote down the exact amounts that he received and exact amounts that he paid out, right? I mean, nowadays you'd use an Excel spreadsheet, but it's all that same kind of idea. And he was very, very strict about it. Some people are not so strict about it. Look, however much there is in, and however much you pay out is out. Why do you have to write it down for? Levine would always write it down to make sure, and it was, especially if there's a danger it'll get mixed up with your own money. I mean, for me, it's easier because I've got my personal account and I've got my discretionary fund account. But if you're dealing with actual cold, hard cash, it's sometimes a little trickier. Even with me and my wallet, so sometimes somebody will come up to me and say, Rabbi, here's 500 Rand for your discretionary fund. So I've got one part of my wallet where I put my money and one part of my wallet where I put other people's money. But these things can become tricky. So,
Just get two of them.
yeah.
What's that got to do with Shabbos?
What's that got to do with Shabbos? Rabbi Ari Levine wants to sit down and open his book without writing anything down, work out how much money he's got and how much is coming in, how much is going out. Would you say that you can do that on Shabbos? So normally we would say that you can't do it on Shabbos, but for the sake of a mitzvah, you are allowed to do that on Shabbos. Okay, or even to work out how much it costs, going to, for a Sudat mitzvah. Let's say you got a marrying off a child. And they got a wedding, or you're paying for your own wedding. You got the wedding coming here, and you want to kind of sit down with your wife and talk about your wife to be, and talk about some of the budget for that. So you're allowed to do that on Shabbos as well, even though it's talking money and that kind of thing on Shabbos. And he says you're allowed to also. So all fine. You can say, I'm donating this book to Shul on Shabbos. I'm donating, 500 Rand to Shul on Shabbos. All of those things are absolutely fine. However, if you would be dedicating anything to the community on Shabbat, for example, a Sefer Torah or a crown for the Sefer Torah, the best thing is to actually verbally dedicate it before Shabbos, because then there's no problem of changing its status. See, when it comes to money, the only issue is that you're giving the money. But when it comes to something like donating a Sefer Torah, it now changes from being an individual Sefer Torah to a community Sefer Torah. It's not the best to change something's status on Shabbat.
What's the thing with saying times chai? Is just a minhag?
Yeah, that's not to get out of this problem. That's not to get out of this problem.
That's to say an amount to do with Chai.
That's to say it could be with Chai.
But a lot of
Yeah,
times,
exactly. I'll just mention though that Rabbi Ben Isaacson said Hashem would far rather you gave the gematria of Mavet than that you gave the gematria of Chai. Chai is only 18. Mavet is 446. So you'd might, right? And Mavet is death. So he says, rather than somebody now, I'll give 3 times Chai. Rather give 3 times death. You'll do a lot more good, And people get quite caught up in the Chai. It's better to give more than to give according to
I'll
Chai.
just give you the math.
Giants.
Back to when Ari Levine was writing.
Yes.
Did not come to why that he might annotate some of the notes on Shabbos.
Yeah, we do normally have that concern, and that is something. There's even a thing. I'll tell you where it came up. I was so proud of myself that there was such a situation that let's try to work out exactly what the details were. But there's a halacha on Shabbat that you're not allowed to read your guest list. If you've got a whole bunch of guests, you're not allowed to read your guest list on Shabbat. Why? Because you go exactly. And there was somewhere recently where I don't know if it was a shul dinner or if it was something, and maybe even something at home that we were looking at. Everyone, it was a Pesach Seder or something. So somebody said, "Oh, let me go get out the guest list so I can see." I said, "No, you're not allowed to." So I explained to them, and they said, "Oh, you know what? I mean, that's something I do all the time. I get out the list, I'll cross out if this one I know isn't coming or whatever." So that's.
but what about
So there is often such a concern, but we wouldn't say that over here. It's for the sake of a
two
mitzvah.
things? One is a shul dinner. They have the list.
Yes.
So you just said like list is a.
So I use my words carefully. Your guest list.
Okay.
The
so
shul
community-
dinner, that's not your guest list, right? I always keep a pen near my seat.
It is.
I've got backup pens.
So sometimes you go.
I've got for the
private.
test as well if you guys need.
Sometimes you go for dinner.
Yeah.
They put the name tags around.
Yes.
So now is
Like you
that
bring
an
your
issue?
pen to
No, that's not it's not a list. That's not a list of
On
names.
Shabbos, sometimes people give books,
Yes.
or someone gives like, "I'll come to shul for the next 10 times," or
Yes.
whatever. That's not money.
Yeah,
Like you
that's
said all those things should be done before Shabbos.
no.
I do-
If you've got an actual book to say, I pledge a new chumash. I'm not saying it. I pledge a new chumash to the shul, right?
I got that
So
on record.
yeah. So if you would say that, that's not an issue, but it's educated for the community.
And when the guy says for the bar mitzvah, here's a certificate for the trees we planted in Israel.
So that's a different issue of that's an issue of doing kinyanim on Shabbat. So we'll leave that for another time. Then he says, okay, you're also allowed to deal with community matters, because basically community matters are considered like mitzvah matters. So an example would be that the shul wants to work out how much it's spending on water and electricity and if it can afford it. So can you set up a meeting with the finance committee and look at, water, electricity, all those kind of things, whatever. Or have a day zero meeting. Are you allowed to have a day zero meeting on Shabbos where you talk about, the logistics and all those kind of things? And the answer is yes. Because to take care of the community is considered a mitzvah. Tzorchei rabim have ketzorch mitzvah. The needs of the community of many people is considered a needs of the mitzvah.
Back on the acquiring things on Shabbos, what about Pokemon cards or trading?
Trading Pokemon cards is a good question. Again, the real time to deal with it is with kinyanim. I don't think that's a problem, though. I don't think that's the kind of kinyan that's a problem. The thing I'd be more concerned about is borer, sorting, selecting. That would probably be more of an issue.
But it's swapping permanently.
It's like changing.
Yeah, so we can deal with it. No, it's not changing status. For the card, from the card to be my card or your card, it's still a Pokemon card owned by an individual. Whereas if it's owned by me or whether it's owned by the community, it has a different status. It's sanctified when it's owned by the shul. Shul property. Think about the Beit HaMikdash, right? If something was donated to the Beit HaMikdash, it now has a different status that belongs to an individual. It's hekdesh. Yeah. You're not allowed to use it,
You don't have to take it back.
So that's the day. If you want to use it again, you'd have to redeem it. Whereas if we're talking about something just between you and me, so whether it's owned on Shabbos, and you're allowed to teach a child books. In other words, school books. You're allowed to go to school on Shabbos. Now, when we think of school on Shabbos, again, you got the problem of writing and this and that, whatever else. But the actual learning in school, the actual learning history on Shabbos is not a problem. And in fact, in Germany in the 1800s, David Zvi Hoffman, who was the greatest posek of Western Europe, ruled that the German Jewish kids would go to school on Shabbos. I don't think it was necessarily his first choice, but the question was, this was something that the law required that they go to school on Shabbos. So Jewish boys went to the government schools, went to school
But
on
then they
Shabbos.
couldn't write on Shabbos. So.
Exactly. So they couldn't write. But the problem is it appropriate or is it okay to learn all these kinds of things? And the Mishna Brura explains, listen, if you don't learn an occupation, if you don't learn how to make a living in the world, then you're going to learn to become a crook. And therefore, even on Shabbos, to teach an occupation to your child, what we call, the secular education, which is geared towards making a living, they learn that kind of thing.
Is this where the guys for the MBA allowed to go to the business school?
Yes, it's similar. It's similar. We'll come to more of that in a little while. Yeah. Okay, but again, you're not allowed to arrange the finances of paying the teacher and all that kind of thing on Shabbos. Okay, some say that in a time where we are accustomed to that somebody gets called up to the Torah, gets a Misha Beirach, and makes a donation. Some say you're not allowed to say on Shabbos how much you're giving, and others say that you can. Tzedakah. Now, the interesting thing is when they talk about tzedakah, so the way they sometimes used to do it was they would give to the chazan. They would actually donate to the chazan. Now, when he says the chazan, I think what he means here is the Baal Koreh. And I'll just tell you guys.
And that's how you earn just parnasa.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you guys something for free, but, between us. Obviously, it depends on shuls, but I would say a shul is doing pretty well if the bimah donations are covering the laning. Sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it'll be less, but generally it'll be pretty good if the bimah donations are covering laning. Laning's expensive. Bimah donations are not always. If somebody's giving, if everyone's giving 10 times high, even 180, maybe. So So sometimes what they would do is they would cut out the middleman. Balkore lanes, and he takes. He gets the takings from the Bima donations. So that's what would be. You get called up and you would give your Balvushi tain because I'll give, 10 times high or 5 times mavet or whatever it is that you want to give to the Balkore. Now,
it's a risk that the Balkura has to take because he could either get much less than the show's offering or much more.
Exactly. So that's the.
It's like a waiter, you never know. Either come out at a good night and have lots of money, or come out.
Exactly. So who bears the risk, right? Is it the shul that bears the risk, and then the Balkori gets a steady thing, or is it the other way around? So now he says, or they would pay the chazan. It would be a similar kind of thing. You would give. So again, cut out the middleman. In order that I'll donate, whatever, 150 rand to pay the rabbi for this month. That was the kind of thing that they used to do. Now he says, what if the person that you're donating to is already rich? You got an independently wealthy Balkori. Balkori is a millionaire, and he loans for fun, or he enjoys it. I mean, he gets something. These guests over for Shabbos. I don't have any food at home. Please, will you have these guests over for Shabbos? They don't have anywhere to go. You say, listen, it's expensive. I can't afford it. I say, I'll pay you for it. I'll make up for you. That you have. To you. If I don't pay you, you can go sell my watch. But this is my pledge to you, to have those guests over. That you would be allowed to do if it's for a mitzvah. Now, you're normally not allowed to measure things on Shabbat. And this coming back to the guest list is because you're going to write it down. Don't know if you've ever done a thing where you're like measuring a room or this or that. So you measure the rooms this much by that much. Things like that on Shabbat because you're going to end up writing it down. However, for the sake... Exactly. For example, is there 40 say'ah in the mikveh? Is there enough water in the mikveh? All those kinds of things. Measuring somebody who's not well, they say, for example. Kind of taking somebody's pulse would be more... more of what we would say. So,
but that's measuring without writing down.
Measuring without writing down. But for the sake of a mitzvah, you are allowed to do it. You're allowed to think about your own stuff. In other words, and this is where it comes in with going to lectures and that kind of thing. Are you allowed to sit at home and think about your schoolwork or think about your business?
No.
Do you want to strategize your business?
Yes.
You want to sit down and strategize on your business?
As long as you don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's it. So you are allowed to...
Think about business.
Didn't we say that as it comes to Shabbos, you say, I don't have any work?
Oh,
No,
good.
no.
Good.
That's only if you say that.
No, listen. What he says is correct. You are allowed to think about your business and plan and strategize. However, for the Oneg Shabbos, you shouldn't. It's a mitzvah that you shouldn't think about your business. And it should be like all your work's already done by the time the Shabbos comes in. Exactly.
Unless that's Oneg for you.
Well, this is the thing that comes up. Now, I'll tell you when it comes up, when I was growing up at least, was when it came to matric exams. Can I study on Shabbos for my exams? Because there, on the one hand, it's Shabbos. You shouldn't be studying for exams on Shabbos. On the other hand, what if you're really stressed and I feel like I need this day to study in order to be okay for the next, and if I'm not studying today, I'm actually suffering on Shabbat. You get people like that they really get stressed about it. So the only Shabbos for them is that they study because it puts their mind at ease. And in principle, there isn't a problem. It's exactly what you said earlier. You shouldn't, but you can.
Studying at school.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't.
Yeah. Good. Next one. You're not allowed to say to somebody who's not Jewish, go outside of Tchum, go far away on Shabbat, to the relatives of the deceased, to tell them that they should come to mourn, or that they should come to the funeral. In other words, go to the next town to go and call the mourners for the funeral. Can't do that on Shabbos.
Can you stand at the Tchum to go?
But you can't tell him to go on Shabbos. You could tell him go after Shabbos, but that you're not allowed to do, even though it's for the needs of the deceased. In other words, that the son will come to the funeral or whatever else. Still can't do that. The only thing would be that if it's for the needs of a sick person to get better, that kind of thing. Or no, not even if he won't get better, that he's not going to get better, and you're calling his family to come say goodbye. That kind of thing you're allowed to do, because we're worried that if this person is dying and they know they can't say goodbye to their family, they're going to die quicker. So by going on Shabbos to see them and visit them, that can actually extend their life.
That's only when you go to the next town. But if you're in the town, you're allowed to go on Shabbos.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
What about what Sam said? Are you allowed to wait at the tchum for that specific case?
For the case of the sick person to go
No,
and...
for the case of the person who passed away and then...
And you want to go get the mourners?
Yeah.
It's a good question. My thinking would be yes. But I can't say for sure. Okay, so they then speak about swapping pledges with because the whole issue of buying and selling land, or buying and selling generally, is D'Rabbanan. But to settle the land of Israel is a Torah mitzvah. So in order to facilitate this Torah mitzvah, you're even allowed to do these kinds of deals in Shabbat. And then you're moving in another house, which